Hey MSM, my name is Ethan, out the West Campus. Guys, look forward to hanging out with y'all and walking through a book of the Bible that is near and dear to my heart. But before that, I got a story for you. My first car was a gold Chrysler 300M, total mom car. Specifically because I actually got hand-me-down from my mom, second child problems, if you know what I mean. Anyways, I love that car. I drove that car through high school, kind of into college, until unfortunately I got into a wreck. It wasn't really my fault, kind of. I may have rear-ended someone, but anyways, I hit the back of this huge truck, and the hitch went like straight through my license plate into my radiator, and like instant, like no power steering, like barely got it off the street. Anyways, everyone was okay, all of that. But got the car back to my house with the help of my dad, and did the whole like figured out insurance and claims and like what's happening and all that kind of stuff. A guy comes out to look at my car to essentially say like, how much would it cost for them to like fix the car? He looks at it, he gives me a call, and he says, hey, it's totaled. And I was like, really? I was kind of surprised because I was like, the only thing that was really messed up with my car was this huge hole in the front through my license plate. But essentially he was like, looking at your car, everything's fine, generally everything's fine, but it would be more money to fix it than your car is worth. I was like, okay, it hurts my heart a little bit. That's my first car, right? But essentially that got me thinking about our story today, because essentially what that guy was telling me about my car was that it was unredeemable. That there was no redeeming part about the car, that it was essentially better for scrap than it would be to actually fix it and drive it. And it got me thinking about our story today and a woman who, in a lot of ways, finds herself in an unredeemable situation. She may even see herself as unredeemable, but what we know about God is that He is a God of redemption. And so that's what we've been doing throughout this Major Characters series. We've been looking at major characters in the Old Testament that point to major characteristics of God and how He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Okay, so I want you to grab your Bibles. You can push pause if you want and find the book of Ruth. Find the book of Ruth, because that is where we are. It's also who we're talking about. And what I'm going to do very briefly is I'm going to walk through each of the 4 chapters and just kind of give you an oversight, and you're going to take it deeper in small groups. Okay, so let me set it up with chapter 1. There's this lady named Naomi. She's got 2 sons, and Ruth, right, you know, the person here, is married to one of those sons. And this story opens in tragedy because both of Naomi's sons, Ruth's husband, die. They're gone. And so Ruth now has a decision, because what would be best for her is to go back home, find another husband, allow her family to provide and protect her. But because she doesn't have a husband, and in these days, like, the husband was the guy who protected and provided for the family. But here, she makes the decision to stay with her mother-in-law, and it's the famous line, where you go, I'll go, your people, my people, and your God, my God. And so there's a little bit of the beginning of Ruth's faith in our God, in the God of the Bible. So she's choosing not to go back home and serve her other gods, but to stay here with Naomi. Okay? Second chapter, Ruth meets Boaz. And so Ruth is having to provide for her and Naomi, and she goes to this field, and she's really walking behind the people that are harvesting the field and kind of picking up the scraps, taking them home, and kind of making stuff for her and Naomi. But she runs into a man named Boaz, and she goes home, tells Naomi about Boaz, and Naomi says, well, actually, we know him. He's like a relative, distant, but a relative of ours. And in Naomi's mind, right, for her kind of pseudo daughter-in-law, a light bulb pops up. And she thinks of this idea in the Old Testament of kinsman redeemer, which is this provision in the law that says that if a lady becomes a widow, if her husband passes away, then there is a close family friend that can step in and protect her and provide for her. And so that is what they're thinking of with Boaz. And then you look at chapter 3, and there's this really cool Ruth and Boaz at the threshing floor. She essentially kind of proposes to him. Anyways, it's really, really fascinating. I wish we had more time to walk through it. But ultimately, what we see in chapter 4 is that Boaz redeems Ruth. Boaz steps into that void. He doesn't see Ruth as this totaled car. Doesn't see her as this thing that would be too costly to fix. But he steps in and redeems her in such a respectable way. If you want to read through it, it's really, really awesome. And so what I want you to think about before you talk about it in small groups is I want you to think about what in your life would you deem unredeemable? What in your life would you say is, maybe it's a situation, maybe it's a person, a relationship, it could even be yourself. What in your life do you think is unredeemable, couldn't be brought back together, is just worth more scraps than it is to actually be fixed? Because the characteristic of God that we see in a major character of Ruth is that we have a God of redemption, that he looks at us as sinners, unredeemable, totaled, could be sold for scraps. But what God says is that you are worth the price of my son. You are worth his death, burial, and resurrection. And so he sends his son to redeem us, to pay the price that we couldn't. Ruth could not redeem herself. And so that's what I want you to think about. That's what I want you to talk about in small groups. I love the story of Ruth, and I hope you'll have a great discussion. Love you guys. See y'all.